Welcome back, everybody, to the VPZD show and podcast. This is episode 28, and Zubin Damani and I are sitting approximately 10 inches from each other. Yeah,
we use the metric system here at VPZD Industries. This is a few centimeters. Do you say centimeter or centimeter?
I say centimeter, but I hear people say, who says centimeter? These Brits.
I don't know who says it, but I hear Americans saying it, and it's been a medical thing. Nobody outside of medicine says centimeter.
Centimeter.
Like, do you say I have 25 cents in my pocket? You don't say that.
And what about, is it JAMA or JAMA?
Oh, no, it's JAMA, dude.
It's JAMA, that's what I say.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to be back with the audience, and let's, as brief introductions, remind people you're Zubin Damania, you're a Stanford-trained and UCSF-trained hospitalist. I'm Vinay Prasad. I'm an oncologist and professor at UCSF, and we host the VPZD show, which is a medical news show.
It's purportedly a medical news show, according to legend. And it's funny, here's the medical news. I drove up to San Francisco to come to your studio this time.
Yeah, and it is wonderful.
And I love it. I'm in love with this place. It's like built on an Indian burial ground. And not a Native American Indian burial ground.
No,
an Indian burial ground.
Okay, from India.
From India.
Right, of course, yeah.
And it's totally haunted. I can feel it.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it.
What the audience doesn't know is that it's all held together with super glue and duct tape, and that everything outside of the frame is wretched and decrepit. But we won't talk about that.
We don't talk about Bruno. It's impressive. I'm amazed at what you've been able to do with such a small space.
Thank you.
Just is it's beyond. And again, it took me years to figure out how to frame shots and do all that, and you just kind of did it because you're a gunner, and I hate you.
No, I watched some. I did what most YouTubers do, which is watch a YouTube video about how to. And then I asked you, and I still didn't get my camera settings right until this video itself. We finally have changed, so people out there who are purists will see that we're at 30 frames a second.
30 frames a second, which I keep because you have that soap opera effect at 60. But see, that's what people don't know about VP is he is an Indian soap opera star.
I see. I could easily succeed in Bollywood.
Easily. Just sit there like you have to make the eye line with the female actress and say, fatafat, get out. And, that sort of thing.
I am skilled at sword fighting and dancing, so I could make it in Bollywood. I could make it. There's so many things to talk about.
Yes.
And we got to talk about all of them.
We didn't do any pregame today. We have no idea what we're talking about.
We were so focused on this technology, we didn't talk about our issues.
That's right.
Here are the things that I want to talk about, and we'll see what you want to talk about. Number 1, colonoscopy.
Oh, yes.
In the news.
I can't wait.
Okay. Number 2, the Science Editorial. Holden Thorpe has taken a aggressive stand against that renegade Joseph Ladapo.
Ooh, JL.
Yeah.
In Florida.
Florida.
Yes.
And
Okay.
JL was formerly, of course, associate professor at UCLA. Yeah, and I'll tell you what Holden Thorpe says.
Okay.
And Yale University has a new guide for academic freedom where they say that students, turns out they're going to have to resolve things by themselves.
What?
I know, hard to believe, right?
No. That which does not kill you makes you weaker.
And what else is in the news? I think...
what about the University of Minnesota Medical School's white coat oath? Did you hear about this one?
No.
This will be something that we can do. Yes.
All right. Tell me about that.
You want to kick off with that, or do you want to go deep on the other stuff first?
Let's do colonoscopy.
Oh yeah, gosh.
All right,
let's get some science.
That's what everyone wants to know about.
Yeah, this is a great piece. The study that came out, you wrote a great piece in Sensible Medicine.
Yeah, with Mandrola.
Yeah, with JM, who is a very thoughtful, evidence-based kind of guy. And what I love is that when he puts out a piece and other people disagree, we actually post the disagreements, and it's all done out of trying to grow and learn and all that, which is how it ought to be.
Well, to be fair, though, we don't post all the disagreements. We only post the disagreements from people who can put the sentence together.
Articulate,
who
right.
Can articulate
we don't
the disagreement.
Post the people that are just showing you a middle finger and are calling you some kind of why even go through all the names?
I can't even keep track.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you the 30-second lowdown. So basically, that there was never a randomized control trial done of colonoscopy. We have had randomized trials of FOBT that were done in 19
fecal occult blood testing.
You remember that card?
Taking the poo, so I'm going to tell you something that you may not want to know.
I already know I don't want to know.
You can order guaiac cards on Amazon.
gosh.
And a few years ago, I started thinking, you know what? If you can get guac cards on Amazon, I'm going to dig it in my own butt.
Oh, God.
And so I would
God.
every now and again do a fecal occult blood at home and develop it just like we do in the ER.
Just to get a baseline?
Just to make sure, I believe in serial testing.
But you weren't at the time, you weren't over the age of 50, and they didn't change it to...
No, I was probably 45, and they were talking
they're
about
talking
changing
about
it. And I said, you know what?
yeah.
What's the harm? Because at that point, I think I'd had some remote family history and some, and I was just stupid. I was just stupid.
Well,
because what if it was positive?
Then you get a colonoscopy.
Yeah, I get a colo at 45, which is what they're recommending.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, on the highest level of modeling, they've come to...
That's right.
Yeah, and I mean, they had data for 50 and above, but they modeled data for 45. But yeah, so
fecal occult blood testing?
But it's all from the diggities. It's all from the 80s.
Right.
Flexible sigmoidoscopy, which probably has the strongest data, it has multiple, now 4 randomized controlled trials. The pooled meta-analysis was in the Annals of Internal Medicine this week, and it shows a reduction in colorectal cancer death. And it also shows a reduction in all-cause mortality if you pool all the studies, which probably puts it as one of the better screening tests. It has the best data. And we didn't have it for colonoscopy. Colonoscopy was, of course, widely preferred in the United States, but many European countries didn't jump there because European country was like, why would you spend $2,000 or $3,000 for something you can spend $500 for, Flex Sig, and why pay more for something that has less evidence, more invasive, potentially more harmful because there's a higher risk of perforation, more prep time, and more time off work than paying for the thing that's more tried and true.
And and this is perfect. So I'll back into a little bit of the difference between FlexSig and Colo.
Yeah.
So FlexSig, you're putting in the same sort of scope. It's shorter. You're not getting all the way to the right colon because you don't have to fish it in as far, which means less sedation, if not any sedation, and like you said, less invasive and less expensive, less time, etc. But so this is where good intentions might go awry. So they said, but Colo, you can actually fish it all the way theoretically to the ileocecal valve or so, all the way through the full colon. And if you could see half the colon, wouldn't you want to see the other half? And the analogy that many people make is if you scanned if you did one mammogram on just a breast, you can't just extrapolate it to the other breast. And they thought, well, okay, with that, and it makes more money, it's more expensive, and all those things. They said, well, more is better, which is the sort of modus of medicine. So what might be wrong with that thinking? Of course, having not studied it.
Yeah, I guess that the differences would be that the right and left breast, as far as I can tell, are biologically similar, but the right and left colon are...
Speak about your own, bro. I have different names for mine.
They're distinct, yeah.
They are.
Honestly, yeah, they even have their own birth certificates, really. But the right and left colon are, fundamentally different. They have different embryologic origin. They have different pattern of colon cancer. When colon cancer arises, there's some differences in the order of mutations, like early P53 loss on the right side, more likely to have sessile polyps. Just different biology. And then when you think about the treatment of metastatic colorectal cancer, people didn't think it mattered which side it started on, but now we know it does matter. There are a number of drugs that have an interaction. They don't work if it's from one side or they do work from the other. So they are biologically different. And so I think it is not the same as extrapolating from one breast to the other. It's extrapolating from a proven study design to one that's more invasive, more costly, that has less evidence.
Got it.
Yeah, and we'll enter the new study, a randomized control trial of 85,000 people. And, we've been on and on about it on my channel and on Sensible Medicine. And basically, it's an invitation study, randomized people to be invited to colonoscopy or not. 42% of the people invited participated. They powered the study for 50% participation, so they're actually very close to what they had wanted. Among the people who were not invited to participate, there was close to 0% contamination. In other words, none of those people were getting screening colos.
Wow. So if they weren't invited, they just weren't getting colos. So this must be like a Nordic thing.
Yes. They picked geographic regions where those regions committed that they weren't going to debut a screening program outside of the study, and they hadn't already. And they pick ages where there wasn't a program debuted.
Got it.
So this is beautiful because, the first complaint would be if anyone had a screening colon on that arm,
you're contaminating.
They'd say that, well, of course, all the benefit is vanished.
Because you're not seeing a difference because there's so many people. Right. So, but 42% of people who were invited in the invitation arm that was randomized did it. Right.
And it varies from like 20% in Poland to 60% in Norway. Oh. And the results don't vary, though. So even though it was higher in Norway, it's not like they have a win in Norway.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
And it had the primary endpoint of the study, and the thing it was powered for was a reduction in colorectal cancer death. And it just failed to meet it. It was 0.28% colorectal cancer death in one arm and 0.31 in the other, statistically the same. Basically, 0.3% risk of death from colon cancer over a decade. The second endpoint was incidence of colon cancer. And if you had colonoscopy in the first few years, there's way more cancer because they found a lot of cancers and clipped all those polyps. But as time went on, there was a protective effect, like having had a colonoscopy meant you were 20% less likely to get colon cancer. To put in numerical terms, it was something like, your risk of getting colon cancer was like 0.9% to 1.2%. So like we're talking about like 1 percentage point, a quarter of 1 percentage point reduction.
And the theoretical reason for that is,
Yes.
again, like you said, early on, you're catching
yes.
cancer, so the incidence goes up. Later on, you're actually having caught already polyps and precancerous
Yes.
lesions that you've removed or addressed, and therefore have prevented the dreaded diagnosis of colon cancer.
The dreaded diagnosis,
Right.
yeah. And I spoke to the investigator this morning, and I said, well, what about rates of colectomy, hemicolectomy, and all these downstream endpoints? He says they will publish that in 2 years when they do their next analysis.
Oh, wow. Okay. That'd be good information.
Yeah,
Because it
that'd be-
probably feeds into the all-cause mortality data.
Yes, which I'm coming to, which is,
Right.
and this is what was crazy. These were like 49 to 64-year-old people in these countries, and their risk of being dead for any reason in the next decade was 11.03%, like 11%. So basically you tell somebody like, look, bad news, buddy. You got a 1 in 10 chance of being dead in a decade.
Wow.
And actually that to me is a lot.
That's a lot. And that's in my age demographic right now, so I'm screwed.
No, you're not
You know-
55 yet. This is
Oh, wait. So I thought you said it was a...
So 55.
55. 55 to 64?
55 to 69 or 64 to 69. Yeah.
Okay.
You're
I'm
just
getting
you're
there.
You're getting close.
5 years later, man. Come on. Jeez.
But you may have an 8% risk of death. I don't know.
You know what? I'm gonna round it down to a 0% risk. Just
But he's about to get in a car with me, so it's gonna. Go
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah.
gonna go 25%.
it's
by
gonna
the
go
end of the day.
100%. Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, I think that's telling because imagine you told somebody that the risk of colorectal cancer death is 0.3%, but the risk of dying for any reason is 11%. It's like it's a small contribution.
Yeah.
The study, of course, is just negative, totally negative. You reduce colon cancer incidence, they proved that, but you didn't reduce death from colon cancer. So then they did a per protocol analysis. They took just the people who complied with it,
Yeah.
and they compared it to a subgroup of the people who were invited but didn't do it.
Yeah.
And they matched it for the covariates they could measure.
Right.
And they're-
Age, other stuff, obesity, smoking, all that.
But
Yeah.
they don't match it for the covariates they can't measure, like how many times you eat quinoa and if you go to the gym and how docile you are.
This is key. Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then that per protocol estimate was 0.15 versus 0.3. So it was a 1/6 of 1% reduction in colorectal cancer death. That to me is like the best case scenario.
Right.
And it's probably biased.
Yeah.
And one way I know it's biased is the two people out there who will understand. If you do an instrumental variable analysis, that number is actually not 0.15, but rather 0.06, suggesting that the bulk of that is actually confounding. Anyway, that's a technical point.
Sorry. You said a word I didn't understand, and that I have a trigger where that just puts me right to sleep.
Yeah, well,
And so-
that's okay. We'll skip over that part.
Yeah, that. So actually,
Okay.
I want to back into one thing you said,
Yes.
which is important. So this per protocol analysis, this is what they did. Remember early on, and this is for people like me that are a little slower on the uptake than VP. Early on, they randomized to two groups, one that was
Yes.
invited to colo and one that wasn't. The one that was invited, 42% of them did the colo. Now, the first argument people who would say, well, the trial was negative, well, that's because more than half the people in the invited arm didn't go. So, of course, they're not even getting the treatment you're trying to study. So let's go back and let's just look at the people who said yes to the invitation
Yes.
and then compare them to a matched group from the placebo
Yes.
that did not. Now, here's what Vinay, I think, is pointing at, which is that might as well not be a randomized control trial anymore,
Yes.
right? Because at this point, you're selecting for people who said, yeah, I do want to get a colonoscopy
yes.
by the end. So they're different people.
They're different people. And I always tell people that if you're going to trust the per protocol, you don't even need to run a trial. Like you can just go to like Kaiser Permanente data set and just say, who got the colonoscopy? And let's find matched people who look similar
Bingo.
who didn't.
Observational trial.
Yeah, and that would have low credibility.
Right.
And this has low credibility. And then the other thing I'd say is like the beauty of the study is that people keep saying 42% is low, it's low, it's low. They powered the study for 50%.
Right.
Okay, so they're very close to that. And then the second thing I'd say is, what do you think it is in the U.S.? Survey data when you ask people, like, are you up to date with colorectal cancer screening?
Yeah.
It's in the 60s.
Right.
But that's not the same as...
What they actually did.
Exactly.
Yeah, because there's a pressure. They feel like, oh, yeah.
Are you up to date with going to the dentist?
Totally, VP. My snaggletooth says otherwise. But
The listener doesn't know, but his halitosis tells me he's not.
yeah, exactly. We're too close.
Too close. So
per protocol study has showed up, and this is how they're reporting it now.
Yes.
So the GI societies and others are saying, well, wait, you said a 0.15 relative risk or risk in the per protocol group that got the colo and a 0.3. So that's a 50%
yes,
risk reduction.
50% risk reduction.
Relative risk reduction.
And they love to broadcast that, the GI docs. It has a schizophrenic response. Let's talk about the response.
Yeah.
In Europe, they say, this is good information. This tells us that we should think about how we spend our money, and we shouldn't spend it disproportionately on the screening tests that might not offer benefit. In the US, they say, no! They say, my summer home!
What did Upton Sinclair say? It's very difficult to make a person believe something when his income or livelihood depends on him not believing it.
It's really sad to even watch the response, but some people said they shouldn't have even published the study because it's misinformation.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's think about this. Let's think of this from a standpoint of compassion. You go to so much fellowship and all that, and you enter a field, which I almost went into, GI,
You did.
where the main cash generator to pay back your loans and all that is screening colonoscopy. I believe. I mean, I don't know. I'm making this up.
No, I think it is.
think it is.
It is, yeah.
Right? It's very lucrative over time. I mean, that's all it seemed like we were doing when I did my rotation, was screening colos and then the occasional like cool thing,
Yes.
like a bile stone or something, an ERCP, something really fancy.
I see.
That probably also doesn't help. But no, I mean, I'm kidding.
No,
And-
yeah.
I mean, ERCP is a whole different thing.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so all that said, you can feel why people would be very conditioned consciously and unconsciously to resist data that says the opposite of what they've been conditioned and trained to believe, and they think they're doing the right thing. They're good people, right? So that's the problem, I think. And you see this with PTCA, with coronary stents,
Yes,
and
with
all the same thing.
stenting and Courage and Orbita.
Yep.
And, many of their arguments I found were a little bit lacking. Like one argument was that they said all the people who did the scopes here were not good.
Yeah.
That's contradicted by the fact that they were really good at hitting the cecum, which is a quality metric. They were really good at bowel preparation. That was a quality metric. And then they use this thing called adenoma detection rate. And it's supposed to be like, 30% adenoma detection rate. And they say like, what percent of people have an adenoma detection rate below some threshold that they consider to be like, inferior?
Inferior, yeah.
And they compared what they achieved in the study to like what a very tiny study from like Kaiser Permanente showed, and it looked like this was a little bit lower. But the tiny study from Kaiser Permanente was more recent, and it was from like a health system where they had incentivized for ADR.
Right.
And I actually like found a registry study from 2014 America, and then this study ran from 09 to 14. And when you actually look at like apples to apples, it's actually very close. It's like
okay.
almost the same ADR.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like doctors in the US are told that matters. So the moment like a measure becomes a metric, it ceases to be a useful measure.
Right, because now everybody's gaming towards that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a challenge.
This is really interesting because there's a subtlety here. Like, let's say your analysis, okay, the reaction was exactly like you said. And it's understandable. I don't, but what you've kind of made a career out of is saying, okay, yeah, this reaction is to be expected because you have a very expensive procedure that you're asking everyone to get. Now, there will be people who will swear that procedure saved their life because they caught a right-sided cancer in a 46-year-old, and they got, without the colo, they would have died of colon cancer. And that is an individual anecdotal story, which may in fact be absolutely true.
Might be, yeah.
But when you extrapolate to a population, what's the downside when you look at all-cause mortality? And we talked about this on our show with Rita Redberg.
Yeah.
Which is, you are now screening a population. So what you asked earlier, a good question, which is, well, what was the rate of hemicolectomy, taking out half the colon or doing something aggressive based on something you found? And how does that affect overall mortality? How does the anxiety produced from the procedure affect it? How does the occasional perforation and complication affect it? And I know a physician colleague of mine whose wife was perforated during a screening colonoscopy, was otherwise healthy, and had a 1-year recovery.
Wow, really?
Yeah, just terrible stuff.
1 year?
Yeah, and this was done at a high volume, high prestige center. So this was not like somewhere in the boondocks.
Oh, I was just talking to the PI, and he made a really interesting point that in the countries they ran the study, most of the screening colons they do unsedate. because they're not, spending all this money on anesthesia like we do in the States.
Right.
And then, people in the States will say like, oh, that's horrific. Who wants a colon unsedate? That kind of stuff.
Right.
But it has a flip side, which is when you do it unsedate, his point was they have like a 0% perforation rate. But part of the reason it's 0 is you can't perforate somebody who's awake. You know why? Because when you push, they'll kick you in the face.
They'll kick you in the face.
Yeah, but if they're sedate, then you can blow right through and you won't even know.
This is amazing, actually. Because in America, too, we have this sort of right to pain control.
Yes.
And meaning like we cannot even suffer any discomfort, brush our teeth
narcotics.
without narcotics.
Yeah,
all the
like
sensitivity
you
toothpaste.
shoot up and then
that's
floss.
right. I mean, I'm in San Francisco, so I can get heroin like to right now.
Obviously, I mean, the city will just provide it for you.
It's in the air.
Just
I mean, there was a homeless camp just down the street where I can definitely get some.
Of course. I mean, this is
Why
ridiculous.
wouldn't I have that if I'm going to get a colonoscopy? It's
Or
the
even
epidural of my
floss.
butt.
I mean,
or even floss.
I mean, yeah,
that's true. And if I see blood, I'll faint because that's too much. But this is a good point because that's interesting. So they do it unsedated, and so your perforation rates of course it'd be 0 because it'd be, imagine perforating someone who's awake.
You got to put your body, you got to put some weight into it. You got to push it really hard.
You got to try.
I've shadowed a couple. Have you ever shadowed a colonoscopy?
Have I ever what? Shadowed one? Oh, yeah.
So here's what happened in my experience.
Shadowed meaning go and watch it.
Yes, not I.
No, I did the rotation because I thought I was going to do GI. So there were lots of colos.
Really?
By the way, dude, people will fart out of their mouth during a colo.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just nuts. Yeah.
And then, did you ever see the $1,000 bill in the CCOM or?
No, it was 50,000 rupees. That's what my dad said. He said, "Go in and take it out. Do GI. Don't do general medicine."
So when I went, we had the scope and they insufflated, and then they had that like biopsy port.
Yeah.
And they unscrewed it to put the like what thing with the clip on.
Oh,
there.
yeah.
And then when they took the clip out, took the biopsy tool out, they forgot to put the cap back on.
Oh no.
So the air was like blowing out.
Oh no, butt air.
Right in your face.
Oh dude. No, that literally was those procedures that actually convinced me I couldn't do GI because I thought in my mind, I can play video games in people's butts all day, every
that's the
day.
allure.
And I loved liver and I loved the cool ERCP stuff, but what ended up happening was I smelled one too many, retro insufflations, and I was like, I like poo as much as the next guy, but just as much as the next guy, not more.
And I got to say this, which is like, we'll agree on a couple things. One, it's really coveted. Like last I checked the charts, cardiology, GI, allergy, immunology, the most
big
coveted
ones.
IM specialties.
Yeah.
Hemo, palm, critical care, like below it.
Right, because they're harder work. Well, that's not true.
No,
that's not true.
I don't think that's true.
That's not true.
And then
yeah.
nephrology, rhum, and an endo,
less remunerative. Yeah,
that's
all it is. Money. Yeah.
So I guess I really wonder. Let's say all the subspecialties of medicine paid exactly the same.
Yeah.
You think GI is going to be as competitive as it is?
It's too many butts.
I wonder.
I mean, I tell you what drew me to it was I loved the GI physiology.
Oh, yeah.
Like I just really loved it, and I liked I'm going to be totally honest here. I liked the psych aspects of it because everybody who came in with a GI problem, 90% of them had some psychological component.
Often there was a psych.
And so you could sit with them and you could see them light up from being heard, and I really dug that. So that was like I didn't know it at the time because I was like, no, I just like putting things in people's butts for money.
Well, one of the things that confirms that is like with IBS, not IBD, but IBS. They've done randomized trials of placebo versus nothing. And in the placebo arm, you tell them this is placebo. No, this is placebo.
It's Obacalp. Yeah.
This is a placebo.
Yeah.
They actually say this is a placebo, but some people find it helpful.
Right.
And it still works.
They get better.
And it still works better than not doing anything.
Yep. I've seen those studies.
So very
it tells you it's this therapeutic relationship. It's the being heard. And, I just did a talk for a bunch of nurses, and you could tell nurses understand this already. And when they see medicine going towards this reductionist, algorithmic approach, they go, well, that's not going to work because they know what does work. Right.
One thing I found interesting about this whole saga was, they put the paper out, there's a reaction to it. It's more vigorous in the US. There are all these kind of, at some point it crosses into like delusional thoughts where people were like, it shouldn't be published, or you shouldn't say it's a strike against colonoscopy. But it is a strike. At the end of the day, now that it's out, I think people have to ask themselves, why are we as an American society paying for this more aggressive, more costly, more time-consuming thing when there's a cheaper alternative that has better evidence? There's going to be a few more studies. I'll tell you what, if some of these additional studies come back negative,
then it's a thing.
It's a thing
probably now.
It's a thing now.
Yeah, but
they've got a hard time running away from it.
Now, like mammography, though, we have to say on an individual level, you may say, well, the colo saved this guy's life or something, right? Because that can always happen. It's just the area under the curve when you're talking about a population screening tool, saving the most people for the least cost with the best outcomes. Maybe colo's not the way, right? Flex-sig, better.
Yeah, it's always tough for me to think about it that way because I feel like it's going to sound crazy, but for an individual, it's like almost impossible to know the counterfactual.
You can't know, yeah.
It's also why we were reluctant to Mandrilla was making the point that he's like, I don't want to tell you about the anecdotes because I don't want to tell you about the anecdotes. The person who had colonoscopy, they drank it, and then they had like an atrial fibrillation episode, or they had a complication while they were getting it done, or they had a stroke peri-procedure. He's like, because I want to look at the population data. So just like there's an anecdote of the person who, in my Twitter feed, there's so many people put anecdotes like my father had done, they proved him, and he died of sepsis.
That's right.
Right? And
so
it's hard to know the counterfactual.
No, you're absolutely right. Now, in a perfect world, we would think in the way you're talking about.
Right.
And what's interesting though is humans are narrative-based creatures. So they will hook onto that. If you don't give them the anecdote, they'll find it somewhere. Like somebody will tell them. And
I also wonder, let's just say we just take one person and you did a colonoscopy and you found the cancer that you think would have killed them otherwise, although you don't really know because they might have died from something else anyway, or the cancer may have been very slow growing.
Right.
But if you just took that one person, and you replicated them 1,000 times, I don't know, do you even get the same outcome? How much of it is the counterfactual, just the randomness of life?
I think humans are they're not entities, they're not objects, they're not machines, they're processes, they're flow. And so as a result, that flow has a degree of sort of stochastic, just random probability to it. So you're right. You take 1,000, if you're doing placebo versus placebo, me versus a clone of me, that's perfect molecule for molecule. The outcomes are going to be different between those two.
That's the other, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's real interesting. We're very complex dynamic systems that, and this will sound spooky, but you spend 5 minutes meditating in a real samadhi, like a real unified mind state, and you realize, dude, everything is just a flow of unpredictability and just awesome, just craziness.
That's interesting.
And it just manifests like this. This is what we see, yeah.
I do think that there's a lot of randomness to life that gets left out of these stories, but okay. Well, the colonoscopy, I think our points are made. The reaction, there was the reply. So one of the people read this article. This is a professor at a university. And this is person submitted a comment to Sensible Medicine and that we publish as an anonymous comment. So the first thing I just want to point out is that when you talk about professors writing comments about colon cancer screening and they still feel the need to remain anonymous, we really have to wonder what's the culture of academic medicine. This person is worried that there'll be retribution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's terrible.
So this person makes many points, but one point is people keep saying 50% reduction, and they keep saying colonoscopy, it won't work if you don't do it, which is kind of all this rhetoric, but it misses the fact that the absolute benefit in a per protocol analysis is still super, super small.
Super low, yeah.
And you could wonder whether or not a person would even want to consent. To be honest, I doubt that I'll actually consent to doing this because I don't want to for 1/6 of 1%. I'm not going to really be drinking a bucket and pooping myself all night.
This is the thing. So when people get the information and they can look at it in a very clear way, they can make a decision for themselves. Yeah. They may say, even for that small thing, I'm anxious enough character, or I have enough of a family history
that I want to do it.
That I want to do it.
Right.
Great. Or you know what? Like me, I'm very on the fence. I did the FIT test.
I see.
No, not FIT. I did the full DNA.
Oh, yes.
Cologuard.
Yeah. Fecal DNA.
That was fun. You get to poop in a bucket and mail it.
Really?
Oh, dude.
Just to freeze it?
Oh, dude. It is, okay. Let's say you're going to ask an 80-year-old to do this. Okay, first of all, don't. Okay. Because this is what's involved. They send you this very complicated kit. It's got these instructions with big red letters do not do this. If you do not do this, the poo will get on the mailman. So you have to put this little hat in your thing and you poo directly into it. Then you have to close it in exactly the right sequence.
What happens if you pee and poo at the same time?
Well, that's the thing. So if you have proper control of your wee-wee, you have to aim it away from this little bucket that sits back further.
I see.
Yeah, because otherwise you'll contaminate it. And if you don't...
Do women have more difficulty than men in doing
Great. I don't know. Okay. I don't know the data. But I know it wasn't as easy as you might think. And I'm a reasonably intelligent guy.
A wee rest as part of the kit?
a little stand that you could... Yeah. But you have to have exactly the right mushroom holder so that you could put it just perfect.
It has to be personalized medicine, is what you.
Yeah, yes, precision.
I see.
Yes.
Precision. It's precision. Okay, so you get the hat, you poop in it, and then what do you do?
Then you got to box it up just right. You got to
Do
put
they
a
give you
special.
gloves?
No, they don't. But you have to put the special juice in it and mix it and close it just
When
right.
you say mix, are you serious? You mix.
I mean, you got to do some. I forget. I think the exact thing, but there is a juice that you put in.
How do you transfer it? You.
It's nicely already in the hat. I think you just break some tabs
Oh,
off
I
or something.
see. Thank God.
Yeah, so you don't have to
Phew.
handle the stool directly,
Oh my goodness.
unless you screw it up. And then you have to package it just right and you mail it off. And it worked.
At room temperature?
Yeah, room temperature. Standard temperature and pressure. It has to be at standard conditions. You're a chemist. You know what I'm talking about. Like the
And
barometric pressure.
What
has
type
to-
of envelope does it go in?
It goes in a box, in a special plastic envelope that you seal, and then you put it in the box, and then you send the box off.
And the plastic envelope, what's the quality of the seal?
Good question. I did not stress test it.
Are we talking about like a freezer bag?
I mean, it feels like a freezer, like a gallon, freezer bag type thing. As I recall, it's been about a year since I did this.
So if somebody mails me some holiday
Yeah.
cookies,
Let's just say this: there are enough haters of us that they would pay to actually have their Cologuard sent to us, and then we'd be like, "Oh, cool! Someone sent me a prize." Open it
what
up.
they don't know is you'd still run the appropriate testing.
I would totally. You know what I would do? I would forward it on to the.
When
yeah.
you get that, sorry, when you
I
you say return
I
to
would.
sender.
I would pay the gift forward. I would forward it to someone I don't
Who's
like.
the poor person working in this factory opening these up?
Could you imagine? You remember that I don't know if you're old enough to remember I Love Lucy at all. But there was the
barely.
episode where they worked in a factory making chocolates.
And then the belt went.
The belt
faster.
started going
Yeah.
faster, and then she started eating the chocolates.
I see.
What's to stop you?
Gosh.
You know?
Oh no! I think that's the one job that even I will say you should wear your N95. I mean, I just
Now, one important thing that you brought up was absolute risk reduction, right?
Wait, okay, but no,
Oh, no, sorry.
When did you get the result?
So I got the result like a couple weeks later.
Weeks.
Because my PCP didn't call me with it until a couple weeks,
see.
and it was negative. And it said, okay, yeah, now you should follow up, and it had all the usual boilerplate about. And honestly, I'm not sure how it made me feel because I was 48 when I did it, and I just thought, they're recommending 45. I'll do it because why not? And then I thought I'd do a show about it, right? And I think I did talk about it on my show. So
Katie Couric's willing to take her audience into her colon,
that's right.
and you wouldn't even take them into
Nope.
the restroom.
Dr. Oz did a colonoscopy recording for a show too, and they made a bunch of drama. Like they played that stinger music where it gets like he going in and they goes dong dong. What's this? And like it's just a
coup d'etat.
It's just coup d'etat. It's just John Fetterman up in his colon,
Wait, so then what about? Okay, so back to this thing. I had to tell you about. So then the Sensible Medicine guy, right, our anonymous person,
Right. East Coast academic physician, right?
that is true, writes in and says many points. I mean, these are good points, but then the last point just really struck with me, which was this person says, I've never in my life experienced so many trainees, internal medicine residents, and GI fellows who he contends do not understand the nuances of the discussion, so adamantly in defense of colonoscopy with the stinking conflict of interest that like it's their own thing. But also, I mean, I think this person was kind of alluding to the sort of the line between confidence and arrogance where, you just entered it. You've not read any of the relevant studies. You never, and already you're coming in and saying that the per protocol is right and this is wrong, and I think it is different than. Anyway, thoughts on this?
So
Yeah.
My thoughts are, we're humans are very narrative based. We're very susceptible to conditioning. These are people who are betting their lives on this career path.
Sure.
And they've also probably seen enough cases where they've caught something with a colo that never would have been caught, and the patients were so grateful.
That's maybe the GI fellow.
Yeah, the
What
GI
about
fellow.
I am resident.
Okay, now that makes me wonder about their brain.
Okay, go on.
And it may be that we're just not teaching them what you're teaching us now, which is how to critically look at studies, how to think through data on a population level. They can think maybe on individual levels, but I think they're as much victims of narrative bias,
interesting.
and they probably have seen some stuff too, and they may have family members who got a
see, sure.
colo. You never know, and so they're biased. They don't know what would have happened. Again, they don't have the counterfactual or the control group.
You're helping me understand, I think, that why someone who's new to a field might be a true believer. Okay, and I get that. But I think the interesting thing about the comment is also that when we were trainees, they were true believers. I knew Doctor, I won't say his name, but he went into interventional cards, and when he was, 12 years old, he was telling me how great it is to stent.
Right.
Okay. And he was that way as an intern and a resident and as a fellow, and this person would argue with me.
Right.
I think what's unusual in this situation is that it isn't just a conversation at the lunch table among trainees. It's that they're really going out there and they're criticizing the PI, who ran the goddamn trial and is a professor and has been thinking about epi for 25 years and published 50 papers on the top. Okay.
You know what's different?
Yes.
This is what I think. Because when we did it,
Yeah.
we didn't have social media.
Okay.
We didn't have the social scoring of getting points on Twitter.
Yeah.
We didn't have a public mouthpiece where we could show off. We could do it in grand rounds, not grand rounds. We could do it in morning report.
You could do a morning report.
You could do it on rounds. You could say, well, I think, and the PI would slap your face and beat you down.
And I think that if you had to do it like that,
and you wouldn't say shit.
Yeah. I'm like, can you imagine? Like, you're an intern and you're in grand rounds. And I guess I want to draw the distinction. Like, yes, like an intern should feel empowered to talk. And like, if you really think that person's arguing, you should get up there and make your point.
Absolutely.
Okay. But I think realistically, in the culture and in the room and in the feel of the moment, you would really want to be very certain you were right before you got up there and said a damn word.
Very certain. I mean, but on Twitter, that certainly doesn't matter. And you get the group benefit of people who agree with you, like all these other people. Because remember, the sort of right-wing Vinay Prasad, if they knew you, they'd know that wasn't true.
The
right-wing Vinay Prasad is endorsing this trial's results and is refusing to believe the protocol study, protocol analysis is saying that, hey, that's a 50% relative risk reduction for colonoscopy.
Yes.
And so therefore,
refusing to believe
it. He's a refusenick. And now he wants to, so therefore I'm already in the different tribe from this guy. And now people that I kind of like on Twitter are saying, well, but the protocol.
But the but.
And then they're like, well, I'm a smart guy and I believe this too. And then they double down and then there's a thing.
But that, I think, I like that it brought it back to me. And I do think a lot of it was relevant to our dialogue, which I can say why in a second. But some of it was even entirely apart from the sensible medicine portion of the debate. People were saying that about the trialist. People were throwing egg in his face. And I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about. And by the way, since then I read like multiple of his prior papers and they're good.
They're good papers. Yeah.
But then back to sensible medicine. So, just looking at the stats, I put out a video on the colonoscopy trial.
Right
when it dropped.
Right.
And then I put out the video with Mandrola and Sifu when we had the debate.
Yeah.
And then right after we talk, I'm going to put out the video with I interviewed the PI.
Right.
And then we had the article in Sensible Medicine and the reply.
Right.
And collectively, among all these things, Twitter, all these outlets, I think we're talking about like 200,000 plus views. And how many people do you think even read the paper? No, not zero.
A couple?
I don't know, maybe 30,000, 40,000.
Yeah. Oh, read the actual paper.
I don't know, maybe probably 100,000 downloads, but how many people actually read it? I don't know, maybe 10,000 or 5,000.
So the conversation around the paper is getting much more engagement than the paper itself, which means people are relying on people they trust to tell them or to have the discussion, which means who do you choose who to trust determines the bias of the information you're ultimately going to get because you don't have the time or the tools to look at the primary data.
So I think that's right. I think that the actual people who've read the paper and thinking directly about the paper is very low, maybe 1,000. The people who are influenced by the editorial, which is written by American GI doctors who like colonoscopy, that's maybe higher, maybe a few thousand.
Sure.
The people who are influenced by the media coverage, and CNN has some terrible story. But this one guy, Angus Chen, had a really good balanced piece in the days that followed. I think that's a big chunk of people. But I guess the other point is I think probably 50% of the public dialogue was captured by us.
That is crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Sensible medicine for the win.
For the win.
Well, I'll tell you this. I was riveted to the what you guys were putting out. I was like, oh, this is my kind of thing. And you know what's crazy is, so this is what my mom does, because she watches our show, but she doesn't follow Sensible Medicine or any of that. She sent me some CNN piece saying colonoscopy doesn't work.
Oh.
That's how I don't know if it was CNN actually. They had just one-lined it as less effective than felt or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know why she wonders. And I don't know if I can say this, but I'm going to. She listens to the show, but you know what? This is on your platform.
No. Oh yeah, it's gonna be.
Yeah,
Oh, so she's
this is
she'll never
this is on
find it.
Vinay's channel, so she won't see this. You know, she had a colo, I don't know, age 70 or something.
Yeah.
They found an adenoma, they took it out, and they said you need to come back in 5 years and get another one. And she didn't because she kept making excuses because it's
At age 80.
at age, and now she's 80.
Oh, she found it at 75.
I think she found it at 75. I forget exactly, but she's a little late for the follow-up, and they keep trying. Now she's 80. They keep trying to get her back. My dad was just in the hospital. She hates the prep. She hates going through it. She doesn't want it. She doesn't want to get cancer, but she's like, I don't know what to do. And I told her, I said, listen, only you can make this decision. But I think that, you know, scoping an 80-year-old, even if they had a history of an adenoma, doesn't sound like a great use of your time and resources. I think it's going to be uncomfortable but again, if you're terrified of cancer, because she did have breast cancer at one point, estrogen receptor positive and all that, and did fine. You can do it. And then this paper came out, and now she's like, well, see, maybe I don't have to do it, right?
Wow.
So it's kind of interesting how these influences all come together.
Maybe she should talk to the PI, because I interviewed him and I asked him, like, you're going to love this. I'm going to put this little clip out there. How do you counsel the patient? And how do you counsel the health minister deciding whether or not to fund it? And he just talked for like 5 minutes how he talks to patients. It blew my mind. He was like, I present the risks and the benefits, and if they say they want to do it, we do it. And if they don't want to do it, they don't do it.
There you go.
And he has calculators that he uses and stuff. But that's not what happens in America.
No.
It's like, you're 45. Get your colonoscopy, moron.
Yeah,
You know?
so her PCP literally is harassing her because they probably have some HEDIS measure or something where she's not in compliance.
And how old do you have to be off the hook for all this stuff? I mean, the randomized trials are not going up into this age group.
80 years old, they want to do a colo on her.
I mean, what is the evidence?
I mean,
I don't think there is.
There isn't evidence. And the truth is, I forget what she had. I think she had an adenomatous polyp. And
And the size of it.
yeah, the size of it. And I mean, is it a sessile, like big villus adenoma? That's a different thing. And so, you know, I told her, I said, you know, I would say talk to your doctor, but I don't think your doctor's doing anything that makes sense. So you're just going to have to, here's the information. It's like you said. And I sent her your sensible medicine piece on it, which she read, and she was like, this is great.
I know.
I'm like, welcome to sensible medicine.
Yeah, it's sensible. I mean, what would a sensible doctor say? It's hard to find one these days.
Hard to find one.
I had a person with metastatic lung cancer, like mets to the bone, the back. We're on like second line chemo. And they come in between visits and said, sorry, I missed that. I had to get my colonoscopy.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And there's a paper in JAMA.
JAMA.
And it actually looked at,
I like JAMA better. You're right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Mama
I like
JAMA?
it better. Yeah, I like
Mama
it.
JAMA?
It's good.
It actually looked at rates of colonoscopy, PSA, mammograms on people who already have a metastatic cancer diagnosis. And it's not trivial.
Oh my gosh.
So people do this crazy stuff.
You're screening for what? Another cancer when this person is on second line chemotherapy.
Yeah.
They're
Median survival is probably less than 12 months.
So you're going to spend it drinking prep.
Yeah.
And going, but this is
pure iatrogenic harm.
Iatrogenic harm and delusional thinking, even on the poor patient's part, because they've been conditioned by the system to do what is told of them because they're scared.
Yeah, I mean, it is malpractice.
I think so.
And I mean, the Europeans their heads would explode.
Totally.
I mean, it's so funny if you say this to an American, like, well, you never know. Yeah, I think this is it's so egregious that but they do often screen people with other life-limiting conditions, and they don't seem to bat an eyelash about that.
Yeah, it's money. I mean, again, I think those systems, you have the public resources that you're spending on it. Now, the thing is, we do here too.
Yeah.
You don't think the Commons, 50% of our healthcare spend is somehow governmentally associated, whether it's Medicare, VA, TRICARE, all that. And yet, here we go.
Okay, let me tell you about the Ladapo.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about your thing.
Ladapo. Who is this guy?
Yeah, so, and Joseph Ladapo, I think he's in his early 40s. He's MD, PhD, the Harvard Medical School.
The Harvard
Medical School. He's a black man in medicine. He was, until very recently, associate professor at UCLA, where he was in general internal medicine and in the health policy division. And I know a lot of people in that department. And I asked somebody, what's Joe Ladapo like? And they said, brilliant. He's a brilliant guy. During the COVID-19 pandemic, I think he initially was anti-lockdown, anti-school closure, a little bit more supportive of those medications that you and I never were supportive of, like hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin. He was more there.
Right.
So that might be the place we disagree with about.
Right.
But, anti-lockdown, anti-school closure, very critical of masking data. Those ones I don't think he's that wrong about.
Right.
I think he's probably right about it. He got recruited to be the Florida Surgeon General.
Right.
He simultaneously was hired by the University of Florida as a professor of medicine. So associate professor at UCLA goes to professor of medicine at University of Florida. And he started working there. He's been critical, I think, of vaccinating kids, very young kids, because their risks are low and the vaccine data is equivocal. In that respect, he's probably aligned with the majority of parents who haven't done it.
Right.
He's also cognizant of the risk of myocarditis. He has an analysis that I honestly haven't gotten too deep into yet, but he has an analysis that links in those high-risk myocarditis demographics where nobody quibbles that there's myocarditis risk.
Right.
He believes they have found an increased risk of sudden death in that group, or like death in that group. One of the points he makes is that it would be unusual for there to be an increased risk of myocarditis without some death signal,
ancillary,
even if it's very tiny.
Right.
But anyway, I haven't vetted all that. But that's the paper that created this consternation.
Right.
Because people said it was misinformation, blah blah blah.
Right.
To be honest, doing that kind of work is just methodologically very difficult.
Hard to do, yeah.
It's very hard to do.
Right.
And even as somebody who just thinks about methods, I don't know if I have a good way to do it.
You can't, yeah. I mean, should you even go down that path? You wonder about.
I mean, I think that my logic is you have enough of a compelling case with the clinical myocarditis itself to argue that we need to think about making it safer.
Right.
You don't have to, as they say, gild the lily. You don't have to go the extra mile.
Right.
It'll naturally be more provocative and harder to prove.
Right.
But anyway, this is the debate.
Got it.
So it's a debate. I mean, look, I wouldn't play it the way they played it, but I do think myocarditis in that age group is so important that I've been railing about it.
Right.
He's appointed by DeSantis.
Right.
So anything he touches turns to
poisonous right-wing drivel.
Yeah,
right.
Because he's a zealot right-wing.
That's right.
Okay. So
he's the one who put the migrants on the plane to Martha's Vineyard.
Yes,
he did it. It was like in the old show The A-Team, whenever BA needed to get on a plane, Mr. T, they had to sedate him with Ativan because he couldn't fly. Oh, pity the fool that goes on a plane.
Yeah?
Yeah, and so Murdoch would always stick him in the neck with some benzos.
No.
Yeah.
In
so
this TV show?
That's right. So that's what Ladapo's doing, I'm sure. I read it. I read it on a website.
You know, it's interesting because there's so many people who worked in the Trump administration, but nobody says that everyone who works under Trump should be held to all the Trump administration policies.
Correct, right, yeah.
Same with Obama,
right.
You can work for Obama and have been against, I don't know, droning some civilian or something.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, just because you work for somebody, it's, I guess I get
guilt by association. Yeah.
It's tough, man, because obviously everyone in medicine and health policy wants to have a great impact. So I actually do understand why would a Scott Gottlieb be the FDA commissioner under Trump? It's his one chance in his life to be FDA commissioner and have an impact.
Right.
Even if he doesn't like everything about Trump, he might be willing to swallow that in the hopes that he's achieving a greater good.
Right. Yeah.
And to be honest, some of the people who worked under Trump were patriots because they may have kept him from doing something like
that's right.
Something nuclear bomb button. I was like, Jesus, take the button away from the dude.
You're fired.
Yeah, you're fired. No,
it's the wrong button.
Wrong button.
Yeah.
So there's this thing about shielding.
Right.
Anyway,
right.
So he has this thing, and this editor-in-chief of Science, Holden Thorpe, this is Science, the journal. Okay, he writes an editorial, and it's basically says a few things that were crazy. One, many people are saying, it's like literally many people are saying, there's no evidence cited.
This is like a Fox News article.
Or what Trump says. Many people
some
say.
Right,
some people saying. Many people are saying that Joseph Ladapo wouldn't have been professor of Florida had it not been for DeSantis. And I was like...
Or Surgeon General of Florida, yeah.
No.
Professor?
Yes, they think the professor appointment was unduly
Wait,
done.
he went from associate at UCLA
you can't even believe it. Yes.
to professor at Florida.
Black man, MD, PhD.
Come on.
Well published.
Come on.
Associate professor at UCLA.
Come on.
They'd be bending over backwards to get him as a professor of Florida.
They let you be a professor at UCSF.
Exactly.
And you're not even black.
No. I think it's, I mean, on that point, I do think it's important. I mean, I would say just honestly, I do think it's important to have black faculty in there, and you need to make it an equitable place so that black kids growing up see black faculty at universities, and that's a good thing.
We talk about it all the time, and now we're doing it, and this guy...
he's not on the right political team.
That's right.
So the liberals don't, they don't like him.
Right. Ladapo, yeah.
I mean, he's an MD, PhD from Harvard. Put aside any issues, anything else. I mean, just his credentials, his publications, the dude will be professor.
I'm amazed the right likes him. They're like, that's an elitist,
Yeah, I mean, and I think he's a pretty decent speaker, and I think like many,
I, like you, have heard from people who know him, and they speak very highly of him. Yeah.
I think it's, so Science Magazine says
yeah,
that.
So what,
then they say, the next claim Holden Thorpe makes is that Joseph Ladapo says, I'm just trying to start a debate. Holden Thorpe writes, quote, this is page 1 from the anti-science playbook.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So this is where like these sort of kind of rabid purportedly pro-science people say is they take the anti-vax people or the anti-GMO people or whatever, and they say they always want to have debates. They always want to say, oh, this is what we're doing. We're just trying to have a discussion, and it's unacceptable because their science is terrible. They're cherry picking studies. It's conspiracy thinking. They're moving goalposts. All the things that come with kind of conspiracy misinformation, and they're taking that world, and I'm talking about pre-COVID anti-vaccine, and applying it to any debate that doesn't sit with the tribe correctly.
You're right. It's just like misinformation is used so much to just mean information I don't like or I'm not willing to accept
now. That's right.
So he says that, and then the kicker in my mind is he basically says like University of Florida is not taking any actions against this guy, and I was like, well, that's because he's a professor at a university, and of course he has a wide berth to say what he thinks.
What actions are you going to take against a professor who's expressing
even if you disagree.
A viewpoint, even if you disagree.
I mean, I don't write a letter in Science Magazine saying that somebody who thinks colonoscopy per protocol analysis is God's gift to Earth should be disciplined. I just make fun of them on my show because they're wrong. But okay,
it goes back to the Peter Duesberg days of Berkeley. I mean, he maintained. I mean, they didn't censor him.
Okay,
I'm sure they didn't like what he was saying.
So then, here's what I think is crazy. Science is a journal, and they publish things on like the Big Bang and like the mTOR pathway. And Holden Thorpe is the editor. And he's putting his finger on like the most partisan issue in a very partisan way. And he has some tweet that says, look at this credentialed expert amplifying a low quality study to make a political point. And then I tweet an example of Ashish Jha. He retweeted a study that was on a website that had unadjusted analysis that shows Paxlovid was good, which is the political thing that his boss bought.
That's right.
And it's garbage. And everyone said, even people who like are mostly agreeing with him said this study's garbage.
Yeah.
Where is the Science editorial saying that Ashish Jha should be disciplined?
Yep.
So it's so one-sided, and we have to be honest. There are like, I'm not a Republican. I mean, there's no Republicans in the university.
Yeah, and Haidt has written about this too. That the shift towards the university being a monolithic political culture, and actually even beyond what you typically call the left, university environments are the far fringy part of the left. Like all the stuff we're going to get to with the University of Minnesota, which is interesting. But actually, this may be a good segue because it is interesting. Like I think. Like all the things the science guy said could actually apply. Maybe they apply to Ladapo, but they also apply
to people he's not calling out.
He's not calling out.
Yes, and I do think though some of the things are unfair. Like
they're unfair.
To say like the dude, he wouldn't have gotten this.
No, that's nonsense. I mean,
it's just
no.
Like
I mean the low quality study stuff. Yeah, like that. Yeah, that stuff.
Like is it? Look, I think the majority of people in COVID policy have at some point cited a low quality study to make their point.
Right.
Except us,
right?
Because I actually don't think we have, but I think a lot of people have. But he's not calling them out apples and apples.
Yeah. And what's interesting too? There's a double standard here. Like he just accused this guy of getting his professorship as a political appointation.
Yes.
Imagine.
Yes.
If we were to criticize, or anyone was to criticize someone on the left, a person of color,
exactly,
who became let's say a female person of color became a professor.
It did happen. Ilya Shapiro at Georgetown is fired.
Oh.
He criticized Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Oh, wow.
Remember,
right.
His criticism, which I disagree with, but his criticism was something along the lines of like that race played an important role in her pay selection.
That's right.
Brilliant.
He was fired for that.
Yeah, I think he was fired. Yeah. Or maybe he had some settlement agreement. I have to double check. But I mean,
right.
I think he was. I think he's like I think he was terminated.
Right. Yeah. So what this guy's saying is politics is what played the role in this.
I see politics. Right.
Yeah. But I mean, is that different, really?
No, well, I don't know.
I mean, you're still accusing this person of not being worthy of the professorship.
Yeah, and that to me just doesn't pass muster because, like, I don't know how many MD PhDs from Harvard work at the University of Florida health policy. I mean,
this is a thing. I don't know. But so University of Minnesota. Yes, so this is interesting. So we're talking about politics, tribalism, healthcare. And this one I'm struggling with.
Okay.
And I want to know your thoughts.
Oh boy.
Yeah, because it's really interesting. So a lot of people sent me this.
Cut the recording.
No, cut the feed. Cut the feed. I love this Rogan phallus in my face. I really like it. Actually, I think I may get one for my studio because I like being able to adjust it.
Exactly.
You know?
You can play with it as you're doing.
Yeah,
and
I like to.
I don't know, but the tension screws, I've never mastered it. If you adjust it wrong, it like explodes like
sweet.
Like, you like open the top of
Dude,
the can and the snakes
It's
shoot
so
out.
much like a penis. I can't even imagine it. So
back to this. Okay,
University of Minnesota
What do they
Medical
say?
School.
Yes.
White coat ceremony.
Yes.
Did you have a white coat ceremony at your
I
school?
did, yes.
Okay, we did not at UCSF when I was there.
I see.
So we never did that Hippocratic oath thing and having the physician parents give you the coat if you had a physician
Of
parent
course,
and that
I
kind of
see.
thing.
You
And
can
so
do
we
that.
didn't do all that, but it's this rite of passage,
Yeah.
right? Like you get your coat before you go to the wards and all that. Now, in University of Minnesota, they read an oath. And apparently, according to the University of Minnesota, the oath was created by students in partnership with faculty.
Okay.
And the oath went viral. And as a video of the dean of the medical school or undergraduate affairs or something, reading the oath and the students chanting it.
Okay.
And this guy who, the dean that did the oath, is a very reasonably respected guy who's been, around, seems pretty intelligent and, sharp guy. They read the oath. It is basically like, first of all, we're standing on Dakota land and we're doing this and that. So naming all the indigenous lands that they're standing on. Then they say it's not enough to do that. This is in the oath. And I'm paraphrasing. We need to actively, overcome all the power hierarchy of medicine and this, that, and the other thing. And then it says, we hereby commit to fight, white supremacy. I forget. I almost want to read it because it was pretty wow.
Really?
Like ableism. What else was it? I forget, a whole list of the usual catchphrases of
Pull it up while we're
sort of
talking.
Yeah. Actually, here I'll put it up on my phone.
This is going to be
Yeah,
disaster.
and
so the reason it gets me thinking about is, what is the purpose of an oath? I think just before getting into the weeds, one, it's important that the oath is not a fad. Mm-hmm. So we have to pick something that has a timeless quality to it. Mm-hmm. So if it's using all this rhetoric that is only faddish now, I would have a problem. I think that's a mistake. Mm-hmm. Two, the Hippocratic Oath was not perfect. It has a lot of lines in it that don't make sense, like
That's
I
right.
will not cut for stone.
correct.
But which I think basically means I will not cut gallstones out, which doctors do these days because we have anesthesia and antibiotics, and I can do it safely. But that probably wasn't true in the days of Hippocrates. So something should be removed, but some things are really good about it, which is I will hold those who teach me this art as sacred as my own parents, which I think is a really important sentiment.
I love that, yeah.
But it was also paired with, and I will teach their children this art for free. But I think they cut that part
They
out.
got that out because medical schools are like tuition, son.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you find?
Yeah, so he says, okay, the acknowledgement is not enough before saying they must recognize inequities built by past and present traumas rooted in white supremacy, colonialism, the gender binary, ableism, and all forms of oppression. The students also committed to promoting a culture of anti-racism, listening and amplifying voices for positive change, and pledged to honor all indigenous ways of healing that have been historically marginalized by Western medicine. They say we vow to embody cultural humility and affirm that patients are the experts of their bodies. And they concluded by saying, we are honored to accept these white coats in light of their legacy as a symbol of power, prestige, and dominance. We strive to reclaim their identity as a symbol of responsibility, humility, and loving kindness.
Well, interesting.
So now this is interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm of two minds on this. Emotionally, initially when I read it, I was like, oh, this is more of this like wokeification of medical schools.
Sure.
And they're just clicking all the boxes, ableism and
Yeah.
white supremacy and all of this. And the people who sent it to me are good people that I like, oh, and they were outraged. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of outraged too. I mean, this is like a kind of almost like a cultural indoctrination in kind of wokeness. And then I read it again and again. And I was like, but none of the individual sentiments are necessarily wrong.
Yeah.
And so you can understand the intention with which the students and the faculty probably came up with it. But now imagine you're a student that disagrees with this or feels like it's a political thing, like it's more of this left kind of dominance of the academics.
Yeah.
But now you gotta read this thing, right?
Yeah, I guess I'll come to one thing. There's just one part that I think is like demonstrably objectionable, which is that line about like I will honor the ancient
healing methods of non-Western. This was a good one because this one Okay, all indigenous ways of healing that have been historically marginalized by Western medicine. So sacrificing a animal in the hospital because that's a Santeria thing. No, I mean it actually
Nobody's
this
doing.
no,
Okay, well,
it came up
yeah.
in a book. I forget what it was. The Spirit Moves Me and we fall down.
Oh yeah, the Hmong people.
The Laotian, Hmong
Yeah.
people in
maybe,
Fresno
maybe
actually.
You're right.
Yeah, so I think that was
But what about this? I would come from the Indian tradition.
Yeah.
A lot of the things they did to heal people.
Yeah, Ayurvedic medicine.
A lot of them doesn't work.
Well, and that's the thing.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff doesn't work. What are we talking about?
You're saying, okay, we're going to go back to the magical thinking era because, and the other thing is, it's a struggle too when you're honoring. You're saying this is the Dakota's land.
Yeah.
The actual Native Americans did not actually experience the concept of land ownership. They were actually more homogenous with the earth.
That's the land part.
Yeah,
come
so
to the
that's
land part in a second.
Yeah, okay.
I want to beat on the
indigenous ways of healing.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So here's what I'd say. I think you could say that there are definitely indigenous ways of healing that have never been rigorously studied.
Correct.
Maybe dismissed out of hand.
Right.
Maybe there's actually some truth there.
Right.
Just like so many actual medical products come from,
the bark of a
bark of a tree,
willow
or
tree or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. What was it? Sinchan tree is aspirin, and Pacific Yew is paclitaxel, and okay. But
and the cannabis tree, which
treats my PTSD.
But
to say that kind of sentiment, it's like it should just be like the statement should just be like, I promise to do medical things that have proven to work.
Wouldn't that be nice?
And things that people think work.
Right.
I'm happy to subject that to rigorous appraisal without being dismissive.
Absolutely. That's all it is. And the truth is you can honor, what does the word honor mean? I mean, I hereby honor all these indigenous ways of feeling. Well, yeah, I honor you. I also think doesn't work and you're not going to do it.
I mean, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And so I honor the literature and the best attempt at understanding.
And it's not just indigenous, even in
anything.
Even in Europe, Western Europe.
Right.
Most of the
homeopathy is huge.
Most of the things they did for most centuries didn't work.
That's right.
I mean, what are we talking about?
You're going to honor bleeding?
Yeah, you can honor.
I mean, hey, it works for something.
Trepanation. Honor.
That's right.
Bloodletting. Mm-hmm. I mean,
human sacrifice.
We have to honor things that work and those who have proven what works, and not honor
it. Yeah. So again, I think I understand the intention here. And initially, I was like, this triggered all my sort of anti-woke stuff. Yeah. But then I had to feel into it a bit and go, okay, so really though, what is it? It's just people are trying to overcome what they perceive. Now, I said this on my supporter show. I think a lot of people who do this, who really focus on this stuff, they're not in the ethnic and racial and cultural context that they purport to be protecting. And in some way, it's almost like a kind of a savior mindset, like, I'm not going, you natives with your ways, I will honor your ways. It's like you don't even know what that is.
Patronizing and pejorative.
Condescending, and a kind of almost like injecting a power differential where it's already there and saying, okay, we're going to further solidify it by saying, but you know what? We're going to, no white supremacy, no ableism, no any of this. And it's almost like that. I think she doth protest too much,
And what about, separate from the content, is just the matter of fact that if they're going to be writing the oath each year like this,
right,
it's never going to be the same oath.
No, it's going to be a different oath every year.
And
now, society changes.
Yeah, but this is is it an oath or a fad? I mean,
right.
I mean, the way that's written is very much a 2022 way of talking.
Right.
So,
right. I mean,
I think here's how I put it. The point of the white coat ceremony and the oath is because we are. I don't know. I mean, one, you could argue that the whole thing should be scrapped, and maybe
that's it. Yeah.
But my understanding is that we're trying to. It's about there's medicine that's always changing. But there's some part about being a healer that is a continuous tradition that's gone back to Hippocrates and before.
And there's something in that.
And there's something
in ritual, yeah.
And there's something, and our part is to just pick the parts that are really enduring.
Right.
And I think that part that I will respect the people who teach me this art and hold them in the heart like my own father.
Beautiful.
I think there's a lot of truth to that because actually the people who did teach me this art, I do respect them.
Me too.
I respect my father.
And look how they treat professors now. They want to get them fired and canceled because their class is too hard. I'm reducing.
Organic chemistry.
Yeah, OChem, right? Yeah.
OChem.
No.
Yeah, so, okay, but all the stuff they're saying is it's stuff that's very much 2022.
It's like they would have said BLM if it were last year.
Yeah,
right?
and then by 2032, this stuff will sound like.
Why are you? Yeah,
it sounds like oh my.
It's kind of like advocating for gay marriage, right now. It's kind of like we got that.
Yeah,
Like
or maybe it'll even
that's
sound
legal,
like,
and maybe can make them back. Yeah.
no, maybe it'll even sound like tone deaf.
Yeah, tone deaf.
Yeah,
like really, why are you talking about this? Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. Now, one interesting thing. So I had Robbie Pearl on the show. He was a former CEO of Kaiser Permanente Medical Group and all that. He wrote a book called Uncaring about the culture of medicine, and he said the white coat ceremony. He said this on my show. The white coat ceremony, it was an interesting. It's the final kind of ritualistic indoctrination where you are separated from the muggles, the non-medical people, and that's why they allow, like in many white coat ceremonies, if your parents are physicians, they can put the coat on you or the hood on you. But if they aren't, they don't get to. It's almost like you are entering this kind of this tribe, and our ways are our ways, and herefore you will, repress emotion, and you will do this and you'll do that. And it's interesting. So maybe it is. I'm with you though. I think that thread of tradition of culture and the ritualistic aspects of humans are very important. That's why I think marriage is so interesting. Like it is. Like I was scoffing at marriage when I was young. I was like, this is stupid. Like, why we're just gonna live together? You're gonna get a tax penalty having to get married and all this stupid shit. Then you go through the ceremony and you're like, there's something here. Like there's something that feels like you are now bonded by community and some higher power. So your analogy is
like, it's interesting that like many civilizations have evolved this concept. And, okay.
Right.
And similar for healing. Healing is like many civilizations have a healer.
That's right.
And the healer has had a long lineage.
That's right.
We happen to come from, I think there's another recognition, which is like we happen to come from one certain lineage.
Yeah.
And isn't that the Western tradition, Western lineage?
Judeo-Christian Western lineage, yeah. The majority in the U.S.
And then the impact of Hopkins on the early 20th century, or like, American medicine.
Right.
I mean, also, if anything, if it's an American thing, like modern medicine is deeply American.
That's right.
And, it's interesting because, like, I say that as somebody who's like, my birthright is not this, I mean,
we're both imported. Yeah.
Imported, yeah. But, I mean, there are great Indian doctors, but they're also of the American tradition. I mean,
that's right. Yeah, that's right. I remember Kainu Chatterjee at UCSF who developed the Swan Gans.
Yeah. Or he something about him that he's like a great teacher. He
was the kind of guy, and I had the experience of actually being taught by him. He would say, it is the murmur of aortic insufficiency. And he was across the room from the patient. Like, yeah, seriously. He was such an amazing diagnostician, bedside diagnostician, but he was pissed that they called it the Swan-Ganz catheter, because he said, no, it's a BA catheter, because Swan-Ganz were like, I think competitors or something, like some other guys that were named it. But yeah, that kind of teacher, again, like honor like your own father. I think there's something there in that. But again, like, so I don't know. The bottom line is, that's why I wanted to talk to you about it on the show. Like, initially, it's interesting, it's been politicized too. So like a lot of like people who lean like very much like free speech, all this, they're like, this is more woke indoctrination. But the more I look at it, the more I go, okay, people are trying to own these cultural rituals in a way. Now, what would happen if you like disagreed and you didn't want to say the oath, or you felt that, again, what good is this really doing for indigenous people, or people who, and then what about the scientific stuff about indigenous ways of healing? So just having the conversation probably makes you think about it.
I guess, my intuitive reaction is, I wonder, I don't know, should students even be on the committee that writes this? Like, is this yet another example of giving students too much control over their own?
And how many of the students objected?
Yeah, I can imagine some people don't like it, and I'm sure they just do what happens in the modern world, which is they keep it to themselves.
You roll over and do it.
They roll over and do it, and I don't know, maybe, I don't know what the solution, maybe is like, got to get rid of the oaths entirely, and like, because you make the interesting point, like saying you honor the land, how does that help any descendants of Native Americans or Native Americans?
Right.
But doing the oath, I'm not sure it actually makes you a better doctor at the end of the day.
Yeah, and an oath is almost a kind of magical thinking too. Yeah, because in the old days they thought you were bound by oath by higher powers. Yeah. Now it's just like, I'm just saying some words.
Yeah, to get this. I think people do like getting the coat.
Right.
And they do like that pager.
Right. That's for sure.
And they may be a symbol of oppression, but once they get it, they like to wear it.
They like to oppress. Yeah.
They like to oppress.
No, when I got I had the coat, the short white coat, right? Because that was the UC way.
Yeah, the University of Chicago way was everyone gets a long white coat.
That's the Stanford way.
To symbolize that we're always learning. Or no, the MDH is that you're always learning, and UC that we're all the same, right?
See, at UCSF it was the hierarchical, like, hey, short coat, you got to be a waiter until you earn the long. And then I go to Stanford and all these kids are wearing these long white coats. And I'm like, bitch, you didn't earn that.
But I don't wear a white coat. I hate it.
Yeah, I don't wear it either. Yeah.
I think it's dirty.
Yep. It's a foamite.
It's a
It's just
foamite.
really there for the pockets and the prestige.
Yeah, and it's also like the most obviously the hospital is willing to spend $0 on it, so
Yeah.
they give you like the most boxy, worst fabric,
nastiest.
the worst garbage.
Oh my gosh, it is the worst. It's all chafy on the back of your neck. You get that weird like red chafing. I used to get that. I don't know, man.
It's got the little tag.
Yeah, the little tag.
I don't know. I mean, I do think that I don't know about this oath, and I don't know how they've written it, and I don't know if it. I doubt it'll be heavily adopted. But I do think that I wonder if we are like missing the forest for the trees sometimes. Like, what do you really want somebody going into medical school to know? Oh, the Hippocratic Oath. One of the things it had in it was keep your mouth shut. Like, privacy. I think that's an important thing in medicine that is really lost a lot. Like, we wrote that piece, Adam and I, called Case Reports in the Age of Twitter. We talked about people just blabbing all these stories.
All the stories, yeah.
People blabbing all these stories. And you may notice that, like, even though I tweet often about medical issues, I never
see you talk about patients.
Never.
Right?
I never tell the story out of school. And then even the people who like kind of cheat around the edges, like Oliver Sacks.
Right.
And, people once said he's the man who mistook his patients for a literary career.
Right.
'Cause he just
right.
telling stories out
Great
of school.
stories, though. Yeah.
Because I think that's kind of a way in which culture has shifted from the original Hippocratic Oath.
Right.
And maybe we need to remind people that there is an element to like keep quiet what you see. And I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't go to a doctor who was like a doctor writer, right? Like,
because you're going to end up in the book.
Yeah, I wouldn't go to Atul Gawande.
Right.
Like, I was recently taking care of a 40-year-old man who had difficulty urinating. I'm like, Atul! No.
Let's go through the checklist now.
Yeah. It's like, yeah.
We'll call him ZD.
No. He's like, he was a professor at a university. I was like, Atul, no, don't say it. No.
Do not talk about my anal fissures.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He was critical of colonoscopy, but when push comes to shove, I was like, no, Atul, don't tell him. No.
We pushed that scope right through his accessory anus.
Oh gosh.
Like, oh wow, you have an accessory anus too.
So I mean, I think so. I think I don't know. The privacy part of it, I think, is an important thing. I think the other thing you want to teach him, and I don't know if an oath is, I don't know what it is to do, but I do think you need at some point to remind people that like one of the reasons why medicine is not easy is that there is no way you can know what's about to come.
Right.
And I think like the problem in the modern age is that they're so used to being successful because the kids who are smart are so successful that it's very difficult psychologically to come into a profession where you just don't know much. And like you can't, even if you're brilliant, like IQ 200.
Yeah.
Even if your IQ is 200, you can't know everything in medicine. There's just too much rote memorization that builds on each other.
Right.
And I think
and too much mystery. There's fundamental mystery in medicine. It's
like
not
nobody knows. Not even
nobody knows. Yeah. And there's a lot of contradiction. We don't know why things happen. We don't understand cancer. We don't. It's just we don't understand gout. Forget about cancer. Something simple. Yeah.
And and then the thing that I think is different culturally is that that now I think they're more uncomfortable with that, and then all this kind of cancellation and wokeification is a way to retake power back.
Yeah.
And, not feel like you're the bottom of the totem pole because the one thing you know more about than the attending is like the wokeness. Yeah,
That's a great point.
I would say that.
Yeah, and again, like these are good kids, man. I mean, like if they're writing that oath, most of them. Some of them are assholes, but yeah, most of them. I mean, you just won a teaching award, didn't you?
Oh. Yes. Speaking of,
yeah, I found out when I got here. This is a big deal.
Talk about this? I won I've won a few teaching awards over the last 7 years of being faculty. A few in Oregon and one here, the UCSF Excellence in Teaching Award.
You guys don't understand. That's a big effing deal in academics because my wife wins those awards every freaking year, and now she's program director.
I see.
And listen, I will say all kinds of terrible things about. When me and my wife talk, I'm like, how come you can't teach me nothing? And she's the same way. She's like, how come you're not funny? And all this stuff, right? Yeah, but when push comes to shove, it is hard to win those awards, and they're not just a popularity contest. They're actually like, did the students feel like they learned something? So I got to tip my hat to you because there are many people that would cancel you for just being you and say you have no business around students, and the students feel otherwise. And these are students that are indoctrinated in the current way of doing things.
I think, not that I know everything about teaching because I don't think you ever know, but I feel like that, why might I stumble onto teaching awards sometimes is that like when I teach about something I know, I feel like I'm good at explaining it to somebody who doesn't know it, you know,
and you're passionate about it.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, if you want to explain intention to treat or per protocol, you know, you want to hear about it from somebody who can tell it to you straight.
Yeah.
I recently was listening to some lectures of teaching and like just you could find on the internet and stuff. And I'm like, what are they doing?
Dude,
it's like reading slides.
Game recognized game, right? When you watch a terrible, you know, I just did a talk of this nurses thing in LA, and the person who introduced me was one of the nurse leaders, and he went up there and he had that audience in the palm of his hand. Like you could tell this guy is an incredible educator, an advocate, you know, and it was the way that he expressed what he cared about. And what he cared about was introducing me. All right. And I've never had an introduction that actually felt authentically correct. And he actually just did it. And then he also talked about all the other nursing stuff they were talking about. And I was like, that's a gifted person.
I see.
Then you see the standard and you go, okay.
Yeah,
this is why we're struggling in all aspects of humanity. The gifted people aren't allowed to, I mean, they often don't rise to those positions. It's usually the bureaucrats and the people that play the game just perfectly right.
So I have another crazy theory, which is I think that, you know, I do think the students, as you point out, are like very good. And I think that the educators to some degree have let them down because the curriculum is just so not related to what they need to know.
Exactly.
And that a lot of this, what people may call like the woke excess of medicine, has crept in because rather than like, I don't know, they're just so annoyed and bored by the things you're teaching them that they want to have all these ancillary classes to talk about these other issues that they may feel more passionate about. But what they don't realize is that we could just talk about real medicine passionately, and you can get some passion here and it'll actually be interesting.
Yep.
And, you know, and I also, I don't know, anyway, I was just thinking.
No, yeah.
But where did we get there?
Well,
So the Minnesota, let's close the Minnesota.
Yeah, so
Minnesota, and before that we were talking about
Oh yeah, we had a whole list of things we were going
Ladapo.
to talk about. Ladapo. Then we sidetracked to Minnesota, and then you had a list of things you wanted to hit. You were going to hit. You talked about the science thing. Oh, what was
Colonoscopy. I mean, I guess I think to put it all together, there's a thread here, which is that, you know, I don't think 20 years ago anyone would have said, "Why did the New England Journal publish this?" Even if they were to disagree.
Right.
I don't think with Ladapo 20 years ago somebody would say, "Why did University of Florida hire him?" Even if you disagree.
Right.
I don't think 25 years ago, you know, you would write that particular thing. And I think
that oath, yeah.
That oath. And I do think the students are capable of learning and being great. Maybe the first two there is a commonality, which is like, I think that it's too easy to complain that you shouldn't have given out this information rather than like try to argue what you believe. And then, the point about the science guy I want to make is like, why is the editor, like, you know, you and I are just two people. We have our points of views on all sorts of issues. But if you were also the editor-in-chief of New England Journal, you know, naturally you wouldn't be able to comment as freely on all these other issues as you are.
Yeah.
And this guy, he can either be the editor of science or he can say Joe Ladapo bad and forget about Ashish Jha.
Exactly.
But he can't do both. It's ridiculous.
You can't do both. Exactly. That was an august position.
Yes,
you know,
august
you know,
position,
and there were other editorial boards that were saying crazy stuff like this about people slinging misinformation and things like that.
They're all getting crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're really abusing the word misinformation.
That's the thing, man. Misinformation used to mean something.
Used to mean
It used to
something.
mean misinformation.
Yeah.
And now it just means, well, you disagree with our particular political narrative. Now again, I understand the group of people that are like, well, you're talking like an anti-vaxxer because that's how they talk.
That's how they talk.
And okay, yeah, so they talk like that.
And that's just the kind of shirt that they would wear.
You know what? Right. They would wear a blue checkered shirt, just like you're wearing. Why am I suddenly talking like George Takei? San Francisco.
That's good.
I was born there.
That's good.
Yeah, I know. Sulu is one of the few voices I can do. I was born there. Are you a Star Trek fan?
No, not really.
Not as much, yeah. When I was young,
I
I
watched
was.
all the reboot stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I used to watch the old series. I started watching it with my kids. They really love the...
With Patrick Stewart or the
real old one.
Shatner. God, the costumes are so ridiculous.
Oh, dude. Did you hear? Oh, you know what? Now they have them in high def, so you can see them in 1080p. and you realize how shitty those costumes
Oh,
are.
I see.
Because in the old days, you couldn't tell. They looked kind of good.
You remember the first time like they moved to the HD cameras and I watched Conan? I was like, my God.
No, my God, he looks so old. Right.
Yeah, and like
That's
the
how I
makeup
feel
on
when I
his
see my
face.
own
Like, sometimes
face.
it's too clear.
It's too clear, like the makeup, and he makes that face when they close up.
Yeah.
I remember that. So Shatner, when he went up into space with Jeff Bezos'
Yes.
penis, he just wrote a thing about it that was actually really well done.
Really?
Now Shatner's a drama queen.
I see.
Like we know this. Like every time, like when he landed, I remember that they did the news conference, and like they're all out in the desert, and he's a little wobbly because he's 90, and he just went into space.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And you could see him trying to grandstand for the press. He's like, the amazing blackness of space, the stars, the earth, it was. And like Bezos is talking over him. And so he wrote a thing and he said, this is what happened. He goes up, they hit about 3 or 4 Gs and he nearly passes out because he's like, dude, I'm going to die. Like I'm 90. Like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And as soon as he feels like he's going to die, suddenly they break through and there's weightlessness. And he's like, it was crazy. So we unstrap and he looks down at Earth and he's like, whoa. And then he looks up into space and he's like, he thought he would feel this sense of like, oh my God, space. And what he felt was, oh my God, the Earth. Like it's everything that we ever thought. And in space is nothing but death. Like this is a vacuum. And he was like, get me home. Like it's a funeral up there. And here is everything we care about. And he said, he called it what astronauts have called it, which is the overview effect.
I see.
Where you finally see the context and the position that you're in and go, holy shit.
And that was the first time he came to realize the Earth was round.
It's round.
Now
Spock.
That's
Now,
misinformation.
That's misinformation,
Yeah, okay.
right? Like you want to send one of those guys up there.
You don't even need to correct it because
Most people just know that's
interesting.
crazy
so
talk. But
I
yeah,
listened to Shatner with Bill Maher on Club Random, but
Oh.
I haven't watched all the old shows.
yeah. Shatner's an interesting chap, man. T.J. Hooker,
Yeah.
great show from the '80s. Terrible show from the '80s, actually. So
Angela Lansbury, speaking of old people,
just passed. I thought she was already dead.
Come on,
That's the thing. It was kind of
Mur-
like, yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, the Murder She Wrote was always on Saturdays.
Absolutely, Murder She Wrote.
But I was a Columbo fan.
Oh, I used to love Columbo, man, and I love the Beastie Boys who shouted him out. I roll up a wooly and I watch Columbo. Let me clear my throat.
I love the reverse detective story where you see the murder. And the whole point of the exercise is to see how does he solve it.
How does he solve it? Have you watched Only Murders in the Building?
No.
Oh, it's really good. Yeah, it's on Hulu. It's Steve Martin, Martin Short, Selena Gomez, who's actually really good in it.
Watch it.
Yeah.
I'm reading some murder book series. I'll tell you offline. It's
Oh,
good.
nice. Yeah, that's good. That's good. We don't want to pitch things we're not paid for. We don't get paid for anything.
Until we get until you get the AdSense.
AdSense, right? Speaking of which, so paid speaking.
You're gonna
Listen.
say,
Yeah.
Oh, you want to pitch us?
I'm going to pitch us, and I'm going
Okay.
to tell you why. So we haven't really talked about this much, but I've been doing these talks, and I have to be honest. I like wonderful audiences. I feel now like I've done this for 10 years. I've reached the end of me standing on a stage by myself talking about stuff. I would love to go on the road with you
And do a show. Yeah.
with an audience that's interactive.
Yeah.
And film it or don't film it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But like do that instead, because I think that would be much more dynamic and more fun for the audience. And we could talk about anything that audience is interested in.
Yeah. I'd love to do it too. So if you're out there and you want to make this happen, you email ZDog.
Go to my website and there's a Book Z thing, and I'll make a new video there pitching this. But I think the VPZD show live in your hood.
With Q&A.
With Q&A, interactive, and we have a call with you guys and say, what does your group want to learn about?
Yeah.
And that's what we focus on. And I can talk about Health 3.0, you can talk about evidence, and we can talk about communication, all the kind of things.
Yeah.
I think
we should have our own little thing about, COVID-19 and how it made us think about medicine differently.
Totally. That's a talk in itself.
I think these shows for the last 2 years have been that.
It's really that.
It's really that.
You know what's funny? So when I go on these things, it used to be people would be like, oh, I'm really interested in what you're building in Las Vegas with your clinic and the Health 3.0 and all this. Now what people do when they grab me in the lobby for the obligate selfie, which is so much fun, dude. It's like, who gets to do that? And it's such a blessing. They'll say, dude, you kept me sane during COVID. You and VP, you kept me sane during COVID. And it's like, listen, I don't even know what that means, but it feels intuitively like something I would like to do.
Yes. Well,
So-
I think I get that's the most common thing I get, which is like, I felt like I was maybe a little bit off, but you really articulated what I was feeling.
That's what it is, yeah.
But that's what we'll close with, that little box. I read a thread recently and it was somebody had COVID, and then they're like, the moment, it was like a family of, I don't know how many people are in this family, but one of the adults in the family got COVID, and they want to prevent it from going through their house. And they were like, so they saran wrapped the door. They like not just in their own room. They put saran wrap around it.
Oh, wow.
And they bought all these box fans and duct taped them together into a cube. And then I don't know which ones you turn on, but it's called a Corthy Rosenthal box or something. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
And they put like HEPA filters in it, and they
Oh, my
duct tape
God.
it all up. And and I was like, what are we doing? What are we doing? See, I'm like, and I had a tweet saying like, if you're using these in your own home, I don't agree with your COVID-19 policy. And a lot of people were like, well, I use it for wildfires and dust. And I'm like, okay, look, I'm not talking about that. Whatever you do for wildfires, you do for wildfires.
Yep.
I'm talking about COVID-19.
Yeah.
Okay, here's what I'm saying about COVID-19. We're all going to get it eventually. I totally understand that, I had roommates in college, and like if one person is sick and you have 2 rooms, you don't want to get sick, then you like keep a wide berth, but all within reason. Like they have to come out and get dinner. I'm not going to saran wrap their door.
Right.
And, if I'm going somewhere, I'm like, I don't want to get sick right before I go. That makes sense. But if I'm like, it's just regular life and, whatever, I'm going to take my chances. And COVID-19, it's going to get to that point. In fact, it should be there already.
It's there already. It should be, yeah.
Yeah, because like 86% of kids have already had it. And a huge percentage of adults, it's hard to estimate, have already had it.
Right.
And if you don't get it now, you're going to get it next week.
Right.
And saran wrapping the doors and buying these Corthy Rosenthal boxes. First of all, it's all unproven.
Yeah.
Like you might as well slaughter the cow and pay tribute to whatever ancient arts of avoiding COVID-19 there were. Pay homage.
Right.
To that.
Hey, you honor the ancient
You
traditions.
honor the ancient traditions
of
saran
healing.
wrapping the
That's
door
right. That's right.
and building these things. But there's no long-term point to this kind of craziness.
That's right. I agree. So I think that's a beautiful perspective that we've tried to bring. And then I'll also talk about the other perspective too, which is related to that, which a nurse told me when I was but prior to the talk. She said, I watched your show forever. My mother, who's very conservative, felt that she was not being heard, and that the left was just ideologically possessed, and she was not going to get vaccinated even though she was elderly and at high risk and so on. And there was nothing that this nurse could do to convince her. And then she said, I'm going to send you one of Z-Dog's videos where he talks about your moral sense and this and why he thinks that the vaccine is actually a good idea for elderly people at high risk.
Yes.
For severe disease.
Yes.
And she watched it and she's like, you know what? That guy did not make me feel like an idiot. And I went and got vaccinated.
Yeah.
So those kind of things on both ends of this, like don't go crazy about COVID, understand risk. And then also if you are at high risk, how do you behave?
Right.
So this ideological possession forces people into these boxes that then don't serve them.
Don't serve them. And I definitely think that, you and I, in the first half of 2021, we got so many emails from people saying, like, were it not for you, I wouldn't have been vaccinated.
Yeah.
And that was the first half of 2021. Now we're in the latter half of 2022, where I think we're just in a different discussion.
Discussion now. Yeah. Now it's like,
are we going to be perpetually boosted based on mouse data?
I had another nurse come to me and say, listen, I have a question for you. And I think I know the answer. He said, I have a 4-year-old who's had COVID twice. His school wants to mandate a booster, and he's gotten like 1 vaccination, and I didn't do another. And I said, well, you kind of know the answer to this.
A booster at the school?
Yeah, at the school. I said, you know the answer to this. Your child has a
Super
high degree
well-protected.
of immunity.
Yeah, right.
And whatever they say about boosters, you know that the truth is what you know.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, thanks, because you're saying this publicly too with Paul Offit, which is very helpful, right? Yeah. So these kind of things I think are the role of medical communicators, as increasingly that should be the role. And we do get accused by people of being, maybe we're biased in another way, that now we're blind to something else. I don't think you are, though. Honestly, I am prone to bias.
You're prone to bias?
Yeah, because I'm very emotionally driven. Like even earlier when I was talking about the oath thing, I'm like, yeah, here was my emotional reaction to this. This is woke bullshit. And And then I have to go back and go, okay, so what is the reasoning? Like, what's the alt middle? Look at this. It's this. Everything's true but partial. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, so then you can have a thoughtful discussion. But what doesn't sell a lot of times? Thoughtful discussions.
Doesn't sell.
What sells is pure volatility, emotion, tribalism, partisanship.
And that's what we bring you on VPZD.
That's what we do. So if your organization needs a couple of speakers, couple of overpriced speakers because, VP is reasonably priced, but I refuse to be reasonably priced. We're there for you.
And then the other thing they can do, I think now it's finally official. You can subscribe
to
Sensible Medicine.
Yes.
Sensible Medicine Substack. I think it's the best place, man.
Dude.
It's just the only place I can go where I read. And by the way, I read things in there I don't agree with.
Yeah, me too.
All the time. Every time Adam writes
every time Adam writes a really balanced, heartfelt.
I'm like, screw this guy.
This guy sucks. No. I agree. And you know what we may want to figure out is if at some point we can do live videos for subscribers only on Sensible Medicine.
I think we can. Live, I don't know. But
Not yet, but we can do videos.
We can do video.
So you and I could do a VPZD show just for subscribers on Sensible Medicine, and that would be kind of dope.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do that.
Yeah. But again, we have a public obligation. That's why we do this. That's not behind a paywall.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well,
and we're doing it on your show now, which is great because your channel is
YouTube channel.
Yeah, your YouTube channel is
12 people will watch.
Dude, it's going to be bigger than mine like next week because you are a machine at making those videos.
Here, I don't know. I feel like you have a proper studio, and here we're sandwiched on one side of the desk. But it has a different chemistry.
Do you feel the dynamic is different?
It's different.
I do. Yeah. I actually we're. This is my take of the dynamic. You guys can feed us back. You can send us messages.
Okay.
So we're sitting here. I find myself looking at you kind of this way.
Askance.
And not so much as interested in the audience, even though I should be.
Yes.
And it feels more like because we're so close, like a very intimate conversation we would have over dinner. And in our studio, it feels more like, okay, this is a conversation that professionals are having. It's still very relaxed, but it's a show.
I see.
And so the dynamic for me, it feels different.
It feels different for me because now quarter of my attention is on, is that recording? Is this recording? Is it coming?
Normally that's me.
Normally
I'm looking at the box because it's my responsibility to make sure I don't squander your time by screwing up the tech.
Yes, and
now it's your responsibility. So I'm relaxed.
And I've screwed up before.
Have you?
I think
I've done it before.
One of the best videos I made, like delivery was great, the points were great,
Yeah.
and then I look and the audio was all garbled, and I was like, no. I think I just had turned the volume all the way down.
That's what happens. Yeah, you're like
my
ruined.
God. And then you never get the moment back.
No, it's gone forever. It's funny. So early in the pandemic, I interviewed by Zoom Eric Topol early because he was doing this study and he wanted to get the word out to try to get people, healthcare professionals involved, I think in COVID analysis, whatever. And his video was gone. So I had to make it basically audio only, which on my platform at that time did not get any listens.
I see.
Yeah, so I'm like, well, hey, now that I see Eric all over being a COVIDian, no, I'm kidding.
Well, he tweeted this Scotland survey of long COVID, and it was like,
I saw that.
We messaged everyone about long COVID, and 16% of people replied. I'm like, well, that's useless.
Yeah, it's useless. Yeah, the thing about long COVID, that's another discussion. But yeah,
one day we're gonna get into it, but
we need to know more. I have intuition about it, but my intuitions can be wrong.
Well, I have intuition and a study, and the only thing I'll say about the study is it's an NIH study, and they look at dozens and dozens of laboratory values.
Right.
And there's not a single difference.
Right.
Okay, and then somebody was like, they didn't look at all these biochemical pathways, and they show this picture of all the pathways, and it's like this huge subway map.
Right.
But what they miss is these pathways are interconnected.
Right.
So if you pick 200 random things,
you're gonna
check them all.
Yeah.
You're hitting a lot of these pathways.
They're proxies for other things.
Yeah. And if not a single one is perturbed.
Right.
And here I'm being very specific. I'm talking about people who had COVID-19 that did not require intubation, hospitalization. We're talking about mild.
Who are now are diagnosed with long COVID.
At 65% of them have what they call PASC, persistent COVID symptoms.
Right.
Which is a lot.
Yeah.
And symptoms and the underlying biochemical pathway,
Yeah.
We'll do a whole
It's
show
tough,
on
man. Because it's biopsychosocial. And the psycho and social parts are so powerful with this disease because we've been in 2 years of
life
trauma. Yeah.
And duct taping box fans
right,
when someone's sick and putting saran wrap on their door.
And conflicts with your mom over vaccines, which didn't used to happen.
Losing your job over vaccine, all this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And then also, Twitter pundits going out there and telling everyone, you need to remember your fatigue.
Oh, yeah.
This is a priming thing too.
It is. And this has happened in Hong Kong. The study about the girls who would have these faintings, drop attacks. Yeah. I mean, there is a social contagion of everything. That's why I say biopsychosocial. Yeah, the social component of it. But okay. Well, we think we did a thing.
We did a thing, and it's good. And now we will.
We'll link to the video on Vinay's channel for people who are just listening on audio.
And you can leave in the comments if you like us on the same side of the desk, if you like the lighting, if you like the audio quality, and if you like the talent. No.
Yeah, not necessarily in that order. Just to talk about the technical stuff.
And email Z if you want to get us.
If you want to hire us. And honestly, anyone who approaches me for speaking now in 2023, I'm going to pitch both of us. And if they don't want both of us, then they're going to get none of us.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because
you're tired.
I'm tired of it. Yeah,
dude, I'm not looking forward to getting on airplanes, but
yeah, but you know what? You're so much on the
upswing
of your career, and I'm on the downswing.
You're on the maybe we shouldn't do colonoscopy anymore side. You're on the maybe.
That's right. I'm not sure about this.
And I'm on the maybe. Wait a few more years.
Wait a couple more years, and we'll decide. Yeah.
All right. On that positive note, we're out.
We are out. Peace.